know firsthand what happens when protections are not strong enough to prevent heavy metals, namely lead, from contaminating drinking water. I have seen thousands of kids in my hometown of Flint, Michigan, poisoned by lead-contaminated water. Let me repeat. Today, in the 21st century, thousands of children being poisoned by lead in their drinking water due to the lack of effective enforcement. For 14 months in my hometown of Flint, children, citizens have been exposed to drinking water with very high levels of lead. These kids especially will face consequences. This is not a problem without victims. Children will face cognitive difficulties, developmental problems, behavioral issues, all because in Michigan, our governor appointed an emergency financial manager to take over the city of Flint, and without any concern for health or the welfare of the people who live there, simply to save a few dollars, switched the city of Flint, not by the city itself, but the state of Michigan switched the city of Flint from Lake Huron to the Flint River as its primary drinking water source. That highly corrosive river water led to lead leaching into the water system, and for 14 months going into the bodies of people in my hometown, into children. All because of ineffective, lackluster enforcement of protections built into the law. These kids in my hometown have a right to expect that the water coming through the faucet is safe for them to drink. And the Department of Environmental Quality in Michigan was warned by the EPA, warned by a researcher from Virginia Tech who came to Flint to study the water, warned by a local pediatrician who saw elevated levels in the children's blood in Flint, Michigan, lead levels. And what was the state's response? To try to discredit those claims that there were elevated lead levels, to actually, and believe it or not, tell the people of the city of Flint that those researchers are wrong and they should just relax. That's what they were told. Relax. This is the 21st century. We ought to have in place adequate protections to make sure that drinking water is safe. Been the response even now in my own hometown in the state of Michigan. There's been some news conferences, but from July, when the state was first made aware of this, until today, the state has yet to step in to even supply bottled water, relying on the generosity of corporations, of labor unions, of citizens, neighbors helping neighbors. Unfortunately, I think they see this more as a public relations problem than as a public health emergency. This is what happens when we don't recognize the importance of regulation to protect public health. This is what happens when we weaken protections for drinking water, for our environment, for our land. Is this really what we want to do? Or don't we have an obligation to do everything in our power to protect the people back home, to protect children from this terrible, terrible kind of contamination? The steps that we're taking today that are on the floor of the House will simply be one more step to weaken those sorts of protections. My motion to recommit would correct that, and I ask all my colleagues to please join me. Protect our people, protect our land, protect our kids. Join me in supporting this motion. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman